It's 6. Good evening. Someone else's mic is on. Are y'all muted? Nope. Testing.
Maybe turn down your volume.
Now we're good. There we go. Good evening, everyone. It is now 6:07 on May 6th. Welcome to our governance session. We'll begin by calling the meeting to order with our native land acknowledgement. Director Bauer.
Thank you, Chair Ford. We acknowledge the land on which we sit and which we call the North Clackamas School District. It rests on the traditional and indigenous lands and village sites of the native peoples of the Kalapuya, Chinook, Malala, and Clackamas. We take this opportunity to offer gratitude for the ability to learn, work, and be a community on this land. And we offer thanks to the original caretakers of this region. We recognize the historic policies of colonization, genocide, relocation, and assimilation that affected Indigenous and Native families, both past and present, and that will affect those in the future, and honor the resilience and revitalization of our Indigenous and Native communities. We pay our respects to the elders, both past and present, who have been the stewards of this land throughout the generation.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Bauer. The first thing on our agenda is review board member related policies, and Director Strado will be leading us in that. Are you ready to rock and roll? You just turn your thing on. Look at that.
Thank you, Chair Ford. Good evening, board members. Tonight, we're going to go through a variety of policies and review them, and we're going to be looking at the impact from the equity lens, would impacting the community, as well as do the board members have questions or clarifying questions as the policy is written. And that kind of feedback would go back to the policy committee group for the work to be done to improve them. And then if there are changes, they would come back before the board. Because the policies, we do see them, we do adopt them. We've seen them many times over the years, but looking at them, this is about governing itself. And I think we would want to welcome the input from Superintendent Utterback and Chief of Staff Shireman to help us if we interpret a sentence differently than is intended to. And so I want to make sure that it's a safe place for any communication to take place. And with that said, let's dive into the first one. I'm going to say this once, I might repeat it again. All the policies we have are rooted from statutes, Oregon statutes or OARs, or could be guidance from ODE or Department of Education or IDEA or a variety of things that come before us. But these policies are typically rooted in the statutes of how we operate as a governing body over the North Clackamas School District. The first policy I'd like for us to look at is BBAA, Individual Board Members' Authority and Responsibilities. If you would take a quick read of that, and then we would look at it first. Is it equitable? Who's being perhaps impacted in a way of a board meeting where not all voices are being heard, or is it being dominated? Or I think this board has done an extremely good job over the last 4 or 5 years of letting everybody have a voice. I've seen other boards where it's been dominated very much by one group of people and other people are very quiet. Tonight, we don't have to repeat or say we echo the same kind of statement. If the set a lot of policies and a lot of time we have to get through. So make sure you speak up, and let's get started.
mention it's in the board book, and that's available to the public. So if somebody's watching on YouTube, they are wondering what we're talking about.
And the public who's watching us this evening, this is part of the board book, so you can actually go to the North Clackamas School District website and click on board agendas and find the documents that we're looking at this evening. So I'm going to start with a clarifying question to the superintendents just to kind of model how we can get through these documents. Superintendent Betterback, number 3, action on complaint requests made to board members. Make sure people hear me. So when I look at that one, the question I have for clarification is, I've been directing people back to the building level or to the lowest level. If somebody's saying, hey, I'm having an issue with something in the classroom, I would then direct them to talk to the teacher. And if they don't get a resolution, they would talk to the principal. And I wouldn't be bringing each small item to you because you deal with larger issues. Does number 3 cover that in the policy itself, or is that something I've just been doing because I've been working together with you for so long?
I would say that our current practice is working. And I think often as board members, you are in a lot of conversations with individuals. And I think we have a kind of a standing practice that we try to resolve the concerns and complaints at the, I don't know how else how to say it, kind of at the lowest level, right? That level where it is where it started. And yes, so if that's at a employee level and it can't be resolved there, then to the principal level, and then we can move it to the district office. So initially, I think is directing people back to the building, to the school or to the department is appropriate. And if the complainant has already been through that, yes, then bringing it to the superintendent's attention is appropriate.
Thank you, Superintendent. Anybody else? Please go ahead. We do work well together, so please popcorn up questions.
Okay, so on the very first statement, should we just qualify that in something like unless required by law, such as obviously mandatory reporting?
And I'm going to chime in and see if the staff, Sharman, is making notes as well during this process.
Hi, I have 2 pieces. I am taking notes as we go for the policy review team's consideration, and I'll look to Director Schradel as he facilitates the conversation if there's anything specific to note. The model policy on that particular item from OSBA says that the board members will return the patron, the staff, the students to the complaint policy and apprise the superintendent. So there is other language that we have modeled. If there was general consensus on the board to maybe work through that, or if you would prefer to just refer to the superintendent, that's fine too.
I was on the first sentence. I thought we were done talking about yours. Sorry.
Oh, clarifying. Director McVeigh, are you saying the first sentence of individual board member authority and responsibilities?
Yes, unless required by law.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Such as mandatory reporting.
Yes, and I think we can talk about that in the policy group. Are there other questions for the policy? Director Bauer.
I was just thinking on number 3 that there's different ways to receive input, and in conversation it seems we follow that procedure to direct them, but if we're receiving official emails through our district, that's where I make sure, and I'm thinking where this applies more to that, but I will CC the superintendent. So I don't know if we want to make that clear or.
So a question back to you, Director Bauer. So when we do receive emails, I typically will then forward it to the superintendent to make sure that if the superintendent is not already CC'd on the email, that superintendent is aware of the communication that did come. Because if it does come to a quorum of us, then it's at a higher level than to an individual board member. So thank you for that. Director McVeigh?
Paragraph 3, I think we've batted this around before. I don't know how it could be rewritten. Maybe it could be the reverse. When the board member expresses, board members right to express their opinions, and it will always be associated with their own personal opinions unless otherwise stated they are speaking officially for the board. Because I'm sure I haven't said at a baseball game, like, this is only my opinion, like I could, every time we're supposed to say, identify this as personal opinion. And maybe I'm just taking that example to extreme, but I'm just, even when we're in a public setting, we don't all say this is my opinion when we're talking about an issue. It's kind of obviously implicit or implicitly. So I don't know if we could reverse that it's always a board member's personal opinion unless they are saying I'm speaking on behalf of the board. I don't know, something to think about.
Director Ford, may I respond first to Director McVeigh?
I think that there is a policy, and I don't know what the name or number is, that states that none of us speak for the district. And so maybe we refer to that there, refer to that policy just for clarity, and then make your statement, switch it around so people know that it's inferred, because this is the way that it works.
I'd like to add to the story that I'm hearing. We want to have spokesmen that are as board speak, and I think it might be prudent to say the chair and the superintendent, and if we do appoint, this board appoint a spokesperson for the school district, those are the people who can speak on the behalf between meetings. If there is, we've used this saying in the past, if there's smoke in the forest, we want to make sure we address it before the forest fire. And so we want to make sure that we have already authorized the chair, the superintendent, and a delegate of the superintendent, if that's what we would do, to make sure that we don't have somebody just being quiet when they need to speak.
If I can add paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, can you explain the paragraph to me? It's confusing to me. Members shall inform themselves with information requested through board action, information supplied by the superintendent. Like, what is this paragraph? What are we referring to? I think Tiffany has an answer. Steven's connection is poor right now.
Sure. I have the model language here, and I somewhat remember a discussion probably
While I get my hardwire.
8 or 10 years ago. So the sample language from OSBA is members will be knowledgeable of information requested through board action. So I think the statement there in policy is, as a board member, I'll be knowledgeable. I will read what's provided to me. I will engage with the information. And I recall at some point board discussion around the board can't mandate what someone will be knowledgeable of, but they can mandate that a person inform themselves. I'm just reiterating what I recall the conversation. I'm not necessarily advocating on its behalf. So the model language is members will be knowledgeable of information requested through board action. So for instance, if the board took action that staff will prepare a report about free and reduced lunch participation. The board then would read that and engage with that and learn that, I guess.
Could it say the boards are responsible for the information provided to them to be informed, blah, blah, blah? Because we should be.
It's something we can take up in policy
Yeah.
because if a board member through action, or sorry, if the board through action requests a report, that report is provided to all board members. And so therefore we get it in a confer, we get it in a packet, and we should be digesting the information that's provided to us. But it's something we can talk about in policy as an interest to look at that paragraph.
I would be interested in that, and my suggestion is to say something like board has access to information, therefore is expected to be knowledgeable from information from superintendent, yada, 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 yada. But I think that the access part is important in order to get people to know that the expectation is there.
I have one other paragraph that I found of interest. It's on more of a, so this board is aware. What we say, verbal agreements, verbal contracts, definitely a written contract. There's actually a statute that says if we were to authorize something that this board does not approve, the individual board member is one who's going to be paying that bill. And we need to be aware of that. We do not speak with vendors. We do not verbally give them a thumbs up or encouragement or anything like that. We have a process as a school district and we go through it. And we evaluate contracts. We do not participate in selection of anybody. Director Perez?
Yeah, that question on that, let me pull up that same paragraph. Members shall inform themselves with information requested, that fourth paragraph. Should there be something in there for our board and for future boards that members shall inform themselves with information, but with exception or with an exception? Is there ever a time where certain information board members should not be asking?
That's an interesting question, Director Perez. I would say you caused me to have a thought. The information would flow from administration to the board. If we're not having a board meeting, we should not be having a conversation with a quorum of this board to understand the data. The questions should go back to the administration for clarification. And we don't want to have a question go out from me to two other board members and then ask one of those board members to ask another board member, because that could be seen as coming for the conversation to be a purpose of an outcome. And we do not violate Oregon open meeting law, which we'll cover later. So that I'll use that example later in the conversation.
Okay.
But thank you, Director Perez. Yes, Director
Thank you.
Power, please go ahead.
Well, on number one, and I have brought this up in the past too, but I'm going to throw it out there again. When it talks about any individual member of the board who desires that information be prepared by administrative staff will make such a request to the superintendent. A copy of such material will be sent to each member of the board. And I've looked at some other policies other districts have had, and I just want to be sure that, there's not so much work for staff. And there's some verbiage in other districts, such as requests for generation of reports or information which require additional expense. I don't know if you can put a time on it or expense, but time is also expense to the district, must be submitted to the board for consideration. I'm just throwing that out as a thought that we can discuss and so that, because there's so much work done by staff and at least there should be a priority to the work is what I'm thinking.
If it's okay, we can add that and take that on in policy if you find it acceptable.
Okay.
Like to move on to the next policy, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Next policy I have up is BCB. It's board officers. Take a minute to read this for the public. Again, this is on North Clackamas School District website. You can look at our agenda for the governance session, and you can then review the documents that we are reading right now. Does anybody have any questions or comments on this policy? Director Bauer?
Thank you. Two things. I'm wondering about the term of the chair. I've seen various times there. 2 years seems pretty short. I'm just, again, suggestion. There's been other policies of 4 years, 3 years. And then in number 1, in consultation with the superintendent and vice chair, establish the meeting agendas. As vice chair, it seems like the chair and the vice chair work with the superintendent to establish the meeting agendas. I mean, I'm thinking I'm kind of turning around. It usually starts with the superintendent, but the confer, we work with the superintendent to establish that meeting agenda. It seems kind of backwards to me.
I have a clarifying question to you, Director Bauer. Chief of Staff Shireman, please chime in, because the couple things. I'm not sure if the 2-year term is actually rooted in statute or highly recommended from OSBA. So that would be one question to Chief of Staff Shireman as the first question.
It is not. It's not in ORS, and OSBA's model policy includes up to 4 years in there.
And I've seen it in other policies as 4. I was looking at that.
Thank you for the clarity. The second clarifying question is, and this is again, Chief of Staff Shireman, the agenda, I've kind of have a view of the world of that it is this board, the elected people of the district who set the agenda, but we put in the wording of with consultation of the superintendent. So I'm not sure, is it something that's not working? And I think, transparently, that would be a question for Superintendent Utterback. Has it become problematic? And would that be a challenge for the incoming superintendent with the current verbiage? Because I would have an interest in making sure it's the best policy we have as we transition to a new superintendent. So.
No, absolutely. I was just thinking how it is working now, and it doesn't seem like this statement is covering what we're doing right now. It is consultation, but it initiates and it starts with the superintendent. So I don't know, it's working fine, and maybe we shouldn't disturb it, but I would welcome any input from Superintendent Utterback.
I believe the current model is working. And for me, this language works that's stated here.
Thank you.
is there an interest by the group to actually have policy committee look at the number of years? Currently, we have listed 2 years, the maximum of being chair. Is there an interest here? We can do a thumbs up, thumb sideways that I don't care, or thumbs down, I don't like that conversation. We're not here to make a decision, but just the policy committee would then look at what the interest of this board is to bring something forward. So is there an interest to remove the number of years that the chair can be chair?
Is it remove or modify? Modify. Is modify a better word than remove? Maybe.
Yes, modify. And I would say I'm indifferent to it, so I'm open to the conversation. Seeing enough, we'll look at it in policy, and that would be okay. Thank you, Board Secretary. Go ahead, Director Orlando.
2 things. One was in response to one of Director Barr's questions. Would it help in that sentence to add in consultation with both the superintendent and the vice chair? And then
I would just chime in with a half cent to saying we elect a chair, we do elect the vice chair as well. If we get in a situation where there's an equal weighted disagreement between chair and vice chair, I think the chair should be able to override the vice chair. No offense to the current vice chair, just from the leadership point of view of conflict resolution. In some situations, there may be a situation where the chair needs to say, this is on the agenda and that's how it is. And if we open a meeting and this board does not want to have that agenda item, this board can take a vote to remove that agenda item. That's the cure to the via Robert's rules. So, and I would see if Director Ford agrees with me on that topic.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
thank you. And then the other question I had was number 6, appoint all committees and make all liaison appointments unless otherwise ordered by the board. Now, looking at this, a liaison appointment, what is a liaison appointment? And would it be helpful to put a parentheses there after appointment and just say example, give one example? Because it's not clear to me what a liaison appointment is.
My understanding of liaison would be if we had, I don't want to use a specific entity, but if there was another government agency and the chair was asked one of us to attend an ESD meeting, then that person would go and be authorized to represent the school board in that capacity, not outside of the capacity of that meeting. But they're not here to answer specific questions unless we authorize, unless the chair authorizes them to. But it allows us to conduct business outside of our board work where we have a quorum.
I would also say that as board members, you serve as liaisons to a number of district committees as well. So the Wellness Committee, the Benefits Committee, Employee Association committees.
Can see, yeah.
Foundation.
Thank you, Superintendent.
And then did any other director have? Oh, Director Wade, please go ahead.
Thank you, Director Schradel. It's funny, some of my comments were going to be focused on number 6 around appointing all committees. And I think for the public, I just want to make it clear that we actually have a yearly discussion on committee assignments and the relevancy and the significance of these committees, because a lot of our additional duties on top of being board members is also serving to those designated committees that we have particular expertise in or skills. or background to offer. And so I just wanted to let the public know that it's, not just a matter of the chair saying, Director Way, you need to serve on XYZ, but it's actually sort of a collaborative process to see what is our greatest strengths and where can we be most useful. So I just wanted to highlight that process.
Director Wade, thank you for that clarity. I appreciate that very much so. I have an item that I'd like to bring as a starting of a conversation. It's a big concept. It's different to add to this policy, and I have it typed so I can actually send it to Sandra if the board thinks it's something that we want to look at. So we're all elected independently. We all come to the board with the knowledge that we think we know what we're going to do when we actually take the oath of office. And I think that most of us sit here and after we start to learn, we recognize how little we know and how much we need to learn. And thank you for laughing. I think a lot of us, this is a very large school district and there's a lot of moving gears. So the question to this board, I think there's a value to mitigate legal exposure to the individual board member, to the fellow board members, and to the district to prevent legal pitfalls by having board members who are officers meet the definition of being trained, whether it's Oregon School Board Association bronze level or silver level or certain types of training. And I've made a list of the ones that I think that are valuable. It's not to say that others wouldn't have input and we can receive input for the policy committee if this group thinks it's wise to say it would be wise. And so my idea was if somebody had silver level training from Oregon School Board Association, they would have completed basic roles and responsibility board best practice course. They would have completed ethics course. They would be completing new board member orientation, policy 101, public meeting law, school law for board members, intermediate roles and responsibility, which is also called board culture, and then the superintendent evaluation. If somebody's in the leadership role, I think they should have taken these things. And it's not like it's a huge amount of investment of time. It's something in July, OSBA typically holds in Bend the training. And by the time you leave there, if you take the right classes, you leave with bronze and you can finish your silver online before the end of this of your first 6 months. If you have that knowledge, then I would think that you've met the ability to not make a public statement that puts us in jeopardy, either with staff relations or with fellow board member relations. And so the question to this group is that something that we would want to have the policy group look at, saying bronze level, silver level would be a good thing? Or do we feel that actually would be impeding somebody's ability to be a leader? And I see Director Shireman. Do you have something to say? Or did you just pop up on the screen? Okay. Any board member have feedback on that? Director Ford?
Oh,
Go ahead, Director.
I just want to say that when I first got elected, I was able to get to bronze within the first 2 months. Was that correct, Director Schrader? So I would
Yes.
agree that it's definitely possible to move through the trainings if you're diligent and intentional, and it's helpful. So I think that it's a good addition to think about.
Director Bauer?
Yes, Director Shradle, I agree. I think the training is just so valuable and there's just so much to know. And there's so many opportunities that with the OSBA conferences or online, and it's a different world, it's just, and it took, I think, at least the first year or so to even figure out, what my role was. So it's so important. I think it's a great idea. whatever level, at least silver. I mean, I finally got gold. It took me a couple years, but you know, it was worth.
Thank you, Director Bauer. Any other board members have, would anybody be against us taking this up in policy group?
As a recommendation or a policy?
It would be in the policy and then it would come back before the board for consideration.
I think that wouldn't be honoring everyone's background if there was a requirement on something that was unnecessary, but we could take a look at the policy. What if someone came from another school board, from another state?
No, and I thought about that, adding to the story by saying, you know, if let's say a long time prior serving board member came back, that we in policy could write in, you know, prior experience or you know, they would actually probably come back with their same status from OSBA. So I'm not sure if that's having a challenge to fix or something that it wouldn't preclude them from serving as an officer.
Yeah, I think as all of us on our very first year would have enjoyed a more formalized onboarding plan, if that onboarding included recommended / mandatory trainings. And maybe it isn't a silver or bronze or gold. Maybe there's just certain things within that that's like, that's just the base level that we expect and we highly encourage you to get to a certain level, but you have to at least take these 3 things. And if we want to say you can't be chair until you get these or something, that might be something to. Anyway, I'm not against it. I just want to make sure we're not creating, someone could be an expert in governance and then we ask them to do governance training and it's like, really? But.
And I do anticipate, because the next policy we'll be talking about is actually the board member development. And some people could say, well, why aren't you talking about it in there? I didn't know which policy it actually fit into, but is there any other questions about the board officers policy, or can we move on to the next one?
I just want to comment to what Director McVeigh was saying. So you can petition OSBA to not have to take something if you can show your expertise. So something like that, we don't have to, you know, insult people's intelligence in that way. But I think for me, what I'm hearing is this is based on someone being a chair, not a board member, a chair. These things are the minimum requirements.
Thank you, Director Ford, for that clarity. I as far as somebody becoming a board member, that's up to the people. As far as who we select as chair and vice chair are the officers of to lead and facilitate the meetings and between meetings. Is there any other questions? Or
No, thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next policy. Next policy is BHB, Board Member Development. I'm not going to talk about what we just talked about because I think we'll figure out where it fits into what policy at a later time. Please go ahead and read this one and we'll get started on it. For this policy, the only item I was thinking about adding to the conversation, but I'm not sure if it's going to be in board membership development, is when we go, all 7 of us can go to a national conference. We can go to the Oregon School Board Association. If we're receiving information and we're not facilitating the meeting, we are fine to be in the same room. We're not, as long as we're not taking board action on an agenda item, we're good. It gets a little bit more fuzzy to me, doesn't mean that it's not allowed, is if 3 or 4 of the board members are actually the ones presenting or facilitating a meeting, which can cause all board members to steer to a certain direction. Doesn't mean it's an outcome, but we might have similar thoughts of kind of like the birds that flock together mentality. And hopefully that's, I'm not sure where that saying comes from. So we are supposed to do our work in public and not come to conclusions outside of the public. So does anybody have clarifying questions on this policy? Dr. Ford? And I saw Tiffany next.
Mitzi?
Well, I was just going to clarify number 1, in-service activities planned by the board and in-service planned by the administration. There's lots going on by the administration that we're invited to, and I think those are really beneficial. And it might be nice to just mention a few so the public knows, but in-service activities planned by the board. I'm just off the top of my head, I'm not thinking. Can someone help me? We haven't
So
been real.
like the governance session we're doing right now would be.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. That's too obvious. Okay.
I'm sorry.
And planned by the administration. There's curriculums that you do, and we're invited to this community events. There's training for parents, lots of that I think is so beneficial. And I think it's really nice that people are aware of that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they invite us to like school namings, boundary changes, and all the easy ones. Chief of Staff Shireman, please go ahead.
Thanks. I do think before we move off of this policy, it's important to note that there's a Senate bill moving through the legislature right now, Senate Bill 334, that speaks to public bodies like school boards developing professional learning plans every 2 years. So I would suspect that this particular BHB policy, if that bill moves forward, this policy might get some work related to that bill also. And again, only if it passes and it moves all the way through. But I do think that this will be one that will be touched on in the next year if it does move through.
And I think it did in the state. Oh, sorry. I think it did in the state of Washington.
Just to be clear, keep your eyes on it, directors. There's some heavy equity mandates in there.
Thank you, Dr. Schradel. My comment was going to be number 4. So, I think it's great when every time there's an opportunity for our board members to speak at a conference or facilitate a workshop. My only maybe suggestion or comment is that whatever materials we're presenting be reviewed by our admin and our superintendent, just so that we are, clearly articulating the message and the voice of the district on particular topics. That is something that I just wanted to bring up. So for example, if we are being asked to present data or current policy or whatever the issue is, that we just make sure that we check with either the superintendent or administration or whoever the appropriate staff person may be. I don't know if we want to talk more about that in policy, but just so that we, again, can protect ourselves whenever we're sharing information with the public on a particular issue or topic.
Thank you, Director White. Any other board members?
But then again, are we there as North Clackamas School Board member, or are we there for our own representation? So I guess we clearly need to decide who we're representing there, ourselves or the board or the school district, I guess, which is one of the same problems.
It goes back to one of the first policies we talked about. I tend to actually introduce myself of who I am speaking as, because I have different titles in the community, just like other board members do. So I think it's important to differentiate who is speaking, especially when we have authority on some other boards that we're on. Director Ford?
I have interest for us to consider number 1, second number 1. Currently, I think we're incorporating the superintendent and the board secretary for this action. So I don't know, it's just a matter of semantics, but with us getting a new superintendent, I just want to be clear. It's not stated in this first policy that it's actually a part of the board secretary list. But at this time, it's a combination.
So thank you for that, Director Ford. To Superintendent Utterback, would that be something that would be like superintendent or designee in policy, or would that be specifically calling out other titles for doing the superintendent will inform board? I assume it's always the same.
Yeah, I could see it being both listed as the board secretary and the superintendent. I mean, clearly, as you all know, events related to OSBA and NSBA, board secretary is the one who's going to communicate that. At other times, I'm passing on information to you of other possibilities as well. So it doesn't hurt to add that clarification.
And I don't see any disagreement, so we'll look at that in policy. Other comments of the policy? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one, which is policy BHA, orientation of new board members. And this one is just, well, I'll get the time so we can read it. So this one goes back to the learning process of from 6 years ago for me. I read the policies twice before I even took the oath of office in July. So as soon as the election was over, I started reading. And then I went to OSBA training and sat in the policy 101. And the first thing that came out of the facilitator's mouth was, don't read any of the policies until you're done with this class. And I'm going, but I enjoy policy. So I kind of just listened and took in the new information. But for the onboarding or the orientation of a new board member, is there any guidance you would give after all your many years of service that you think would be helpful for future board members in this policy?
As new board members coming, into a role, my advice would certainly be for them to read and absorb as much as they can of the information that will be provided to them, to meet staff and visit schools and do all those pieces. And I think to ask a lot of questions, to help clarify perhaps one's assumptions or beliefs about how things happen or don't happen in the school district. So it comes back to, I think, one of those guiding principles of it's this kind of checking assumptions and asking those questions early on in the process.
So, and I'll add to the story when when I first started, and then I've given this advice to many new board members, it doesn't mean that it's going to fit into a policy, but if you felt that this was helpful, if you heard it from me or heard it from somebody else, I think any new board member, because there's so much to learn, I think finding somebody you identify on the board and having coffee with them so that you can understand the why behind some of the agenda items, not for the purpose of an outcome, just to understand that, I'll use my example, assume a positive intent of my fellow board members, or the discussion that might be a difficult conversation to have. It might be a heated community agenda item. And so for me, I'll use the word mentor, having somebody who I could talk with and find out how this large organization runs and why is this done or that not done. It helped me, and hopefully it helped others. And if you think that was actually good, I think it doesn't have to be in policy, but have something we could be passing on to future board members. Does anybody have any feedback of things that they thought were helpful or something that you think would be helpful in the policy? Director Betaloga.
Yes, thank you. I did have one quick comment about the first bullet, the electee or appointed member will be given materials. I noticed in a few other district board policies that it's a little more specific, and I really liked that. And it says that the board chair and the superintendent shall provide each new board member elect and or appointee with information. And I like that because I think it just makes sure it delineates and makes sure that we understand who's going to be giving that information. So I like that in several of the ones that I read.
Anybody else? I think that's a fine thing to add to the conversation and policy. Director Ford.
I just want to agree with Director Benaloga. I think that it's important that the designated leaders are the ones handing over leadership information or pertinent information first. And then, of course, if there's a natural alignment where mentorship happens, and that should be encouraged, but I think it's important that they see and get all the same information when they first come on. Creates consistency.
I may propose just an additional couple of words to that. Number one, will be given materials. To me, that in some respects is a hard copy paper. We've worked really hard to put the board materials all online in a resource page. So I might suggest that we say be given materials or online access to materials is a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any other feedback? Okay, next up is it's actually the oath of office. It's ORS 332.005. You can please review the front and back of this document. There's not much to these 2 pages, but they actually are very specific. The oath of office we take is actually rooted in statute. And so it's very important that we understand that we're taking to the oath of office as it's written, to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States of America and the state of Oregon and the policies of North Clackamas School District. It's important that we all have taken the same oath and that this is the oath of office to be seated, to be a duly elected member of North Clackamas School Board. I'm not sure if this is more just for reference. It's not really something we can modify. And the last document, which is good because this has taken a long time and I appreciate everybody's time. This has to do with the reason I asked this would be brought forward is it comes back to Oregon open meeting law. And I used the example earlier saying, hey, we all can go to an OSBA training, and as long as we're not all facilitating, then if we're receiving information, we're all good to be in the same room. But if we're holding a meeting and there's a quorum of us, and the quorum is learning about something that is the school district's work, and 4 go and 3 are not aware of what happens, at minimum, I think the cure would be to have a liaison come back and do a presentation to the full board of what took place at a meeting if the board members were to be the facilitators of that meeting, aware of everything as a board as a whole, instead of 4 board members being aware of something that the other 3 are not aware of. Any questions on what I said, or has everybody taken the OSBA training for Oregon open meeting law? And there's a lot of classes, so it's this one I'm just going to end with when I was on a school board. I was on a school board, charter school before district board, and if you haven't done this, if you have an umbrella policy for your home, you would want to contact them and let them know that you're public elected and you want to have a rider put onto your insurance that would help cover your legal bills. We as a board, as an individual, we can be sued for $2,500 if we were to violate Oregon open meeting law. So it's very important that we understand what the Oregon open meeting law is, but also it's wise to contact your insurance company and see if you actually can do a rider, because there's willfully violating Oregon open meeting law, and then there's I'm not aware of it. But even if you're unaware of it, doesn't mean that it's not going to be okay. You could have an expense. So please consider that. You don't have to do what I say. It's just more of a hint. Anybody have any questions about Oregon open meeting law, or seeing none? I'm going to pass it back to Director Ford. Thank you very much for allowing me to facilitate this. And
thank you, Director Fredo. Excited to see what the outcomes are with that. I'm confident that Miss Tiffany will take great care of that information. All right, next on our agenda is our board attendance at graduation ceremonies. This is exciting, Superintendent Utterback.
This is exciting. Our high schools right now are in the process of planning multiple options for our high school graduations this year. So it seems like everything with the pandemic is multiple plans and looking at things from multiple perspectives. Our graduations are a part of that. What we're being guided by is guidance from the Oregon Department of Education, as well as OHA on large gatherings. And as we all know, depending upon the number of cases or the hospitalization rates, we are constantly, it seems like, fluctuating between various levels within the county health metrics there. And so with that, I just want to share with you some general information and have you put some holding dates on your calendar to prepare. So our hope right out of the chute is to do large graduation ceremony outside. That's the goal. That will be dictated by the county risk level and how many people can gather, for example, at a football stadium or a football soccer stadium on our campuses. So if we're at a higher risk level, we're going to be able to bring fewer people onto the stadium and onto the field at a given time, which then may need to facilitate multiple outdoor graduations, taking a high school senior class and breaking it into 2 or 3 smaller groups to go through a ceremony. We're also planning, as we did last year, graduations as well, depending upon where we are as a county at that time. So really looking at, can we do a big graduation in the starting place? Can we do smaller graduations? Would be kind of the fallback. And then the third fallback would be some sort of online option. So what we're looking at, and these are the dates if you want to write them down. Clackamas High School would be June 13th. And then we're also looking at some alternative dates in case we need to do multiple ceremonies. And that would be June 12th and June 14th. One day on either side of that. Don't have times yet. We're working on when those could be. Rex Putnam High School will be June 14th with the possible backup date of June 15th. Milwaukee High School will be June 15th with the possibility of June 16th as a kind of an additional date. And New Urban High School will be June 16th. And they're trying really hard just to hold to that date at New Urban. We will get you dates from our 2 charter schools when we have those. These ceremonies obviously will look different. We're going to attempt to do them outside. We will be required, obviously, to meet to the guidance of physical distancing. So at this point, we're not planning for board members to be on stage doing the handshakes and handing the diplomas. That will look different, but we would love for you to attend and help to recognize our graduating seniors. And really a class, if you really think about what their last 15 months of high school has looked like, it's something that probably none of us would have imagined 15 months ago. And so certainly a special group of kids and what they have gone through to earn that diploma this year, I think will probably hold a special place in all of our hearts and all of our memories moving forward. So just that's where we are with graduations. And again, probably 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th. You want to just make sure to have those dates, save them as many of those dates as you can on your calendar. I know you're all busy, and I will get more information to you when we have it. But I wanted to share with you what we're thinking, let the public know what we're thinking as well, and know that our high schools are working really hard to get seniors graduated and also plan for these multiple possibility events. And I didn't even mention the possibility of rain, which is fairly common in June in our state. So that also plays a role in this. But I will say there are a number of high schools in Oregon that for decades have held their graduations outside, and rain or shine, and they do it. So with that, I will pause and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent Underback. I know that graduation ceremonies are just so special for not only the graduate, but just family members, relatives. And I just know that even before COVID, there were, just a set number of tickets that get handed out. I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 a family. Do we have a sense yet of what those numbers will look like this year per graduate, or still figuring it out?
Yeah, we really don't. And I think a lot of it will come down to the capacity, on that day for that event. And we're gonna have to plan for that. And we're gonna have to, I think, be fairly flexible. I think we're hoping, we're certainly seeing a lot of health officials say that we should start to see these rates decline. And so what are we, 6 weeks out, I think, from graduation? So hopefully in the next 6 weeks, it would be great if we could get to we're in the high risk right now, to get into that moderate second range would be really helpful for us to be able to have more folks at those events. So one of the things I think the schools are going to have to wrestle with is, do they want a whole bunch of graduates there and fewer spectators? Or do they want to have fewer graduates and more spectators in more ceremonies? That's what they're going to have, that's what they'll have to wrestle with. And I know that they will include our students in that planning process and get student feedback.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Utterback. Could we also get the information on the PACE graduation as well? I mean, I know not necessarily tonight, but just as we're getting the dates, could we also get that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All
We'll get
thank
that.
you.
We'll get that to you.
All right, seeing no more questions. Thank you, Superintendent. Great information. I'm excited. Next on the agenda, we have the live streaming in person for board meetings. Superintendent Utterback.
So I do hope that sometime in the near future, we're back to hosting board meetings in the room that where public can join us. But I think one of the things that we've learned through the pandemic is that we can also stream our meetings to a broader audience via YouTube. And so the question I would like to propose for the board's discussion tonight is when we return to in-person meetings where we can have the public join us in our board meetings, would we like to also provide the opportunity to stream those meetings, those in-person meetings via YouTube as well? And the reason why I'm asking is it will cost us financially to purchase some cameras for the boardroom that obviously will then tie into our speaker system here. But we're talking, some moderate dollars. But before we invest in those dollars, I just want to make sure that if we were to do that, is that the direction that the board would like to move to?
Just clarity, this is just consensus acts, correct?
Correct.
During governance,
Yep.
okay. Comments?
I just have a clarifying.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Director Spray.
Thank you, Superintendent Utterback. All right, and this live streaming in person would just be for our general public board meetings to be streamed. So twice a month, traditionally held meetings.
I think that would be the general use, the consistent use, but it does also would allow us to stream other events that would occur in this building. So the
Okay.
cameras would be likely permanently mounted in the room and again integrated into the speaker system. So we could also then host other events, recognitions in here and stream that and post that on the website as well. So
Okay.
just not for board meetings.
Okay.
I guess I might have 3 or 5 questions, but we'll find out. I value the in-person meeting. So by default, when this is done, when pandemic is done and we come back to in-person meetings, I would say I want to be able to see the people who are speaking before us in real life. So I guess the clarifying question would be, one, is this so that the public can participate and give testimony to us remote, or is this more for them to be able to just watch us do our work? Because it's easier for people to not see other people as much as a human when they're looking at a computer screen. And so I think the value of them coming before us is they see us and they know that they see our emotion. They can see everybody. They just don't see one person. I understand the camera system can see maybe the entire room, but what's the interest? Or have you thought that part through?
I think it's a fair question, and other board members certainly feel free to chime in. But I think there's some advantages, I believe, of being able to stream your meetings. You're going to reach a broader audience. There are barriers for members, getting into a room on a Thursday night at a certain time period. So for folks to be able to watch it live from home, maybe they've got young kids and children they need to put to bed, or work with homework on, or whatever the reasons are. And it also allows that recording to live on the web, so people can watch it at a later date. I don't envision us running the meetings via Zoom like we are now. I think my recommendation would be the meeting is live in person. And therefore, folks would like to share information and present to the board. They have two ways of doing that. One is coming to the board meeting, the other is to provide written comments to the board, is what I would recommend at this point. But I would, to continue to do the Zoom feature, it causes barriers for, I think, participation. To answer your question.
Yeah, thank you for the clarity on that.
Dr. McVeigh?
I hear it causes barriers I can see that, but I could also see people not being comfortable coming in front of the board from the public because they don't want to be on TV and have what they are saying that could be very emotional live on the web, or what their kids have say live on the web, or if their kids are presenting from a school and that live on the web forever. And so I think it could be, I'm not opposed for the district to spend the money for, if like we ever had a meeting where we're at capacity and we had to turn people away, we could turn it on. If you had needed to have broadcast a district event, we could use the cameras or whatnot, but to have every meeting viewable forever with people who aren't elected and be forcing them if they want to talk to the board to be on camera, I'm not sure I could do that.
I have a few comments. One, I think the streaming is a great idea, mostly because of the barriers that you discussed. In particular, the barrier that we didn't bring up is language barriers. I think the streaming allows for people that have a language barrier to have some smoother communication, whether that's watching it later and having a translator or us having translators, whatever that is. I agree with Director McVeigh about, the positioning of community requests. And I think that we could create something where those are not streamed. There's no requirements for us to stream that part of it. We can easily turn the camera off and turn it back on afterwards. But I do think that the world is moving to a hybrid solution in many ways. And we have a lot of people who have been able to engage this way that have never engaged before. And I don't want to lose that engagement just because we go back to just live as an option. So I think it's a good option for us in the future.
I hadn't thought of it, asking them choice or no choice, or signing it, when they sign up, do you want to be okay to be on camera or not? Or so.
And I also will add that most public meetings with elected officials are streamed before COVID, so I just think it's something for us to consider if we have the option to move forward. I really like the idea of this room being a possibility of having more things streamed, not just us, it's not all about us, but other things that the district is doing at a smaller capacity that could be seen by more. I think that that's a great option. There's lots of families who are transient here, who have families that are not here, and things happen in the state and they can't see it. And so I just think that this is a great addition to what we obviously will go back to.
Just to follow up, just like trainings. I mean, maybe one thing we have learned in COVID is even if you don't have COVID and you don't feel good, you probably should stay home. But maybe you're not so sick where you couldn't have a training that the district was providing as an educator or staff member, and you're like, I'd like to participate, but I'm sneezing, I'm coughing, and they could be, so there are some great options that stream. Sorry, Gina.
I just had another, just again, to kind of comment on Libra's comment about the language. That was my question, is what kind of translation services? That is amazing if there can be more options for translation services for for folks that maybe would need that language help. So I would be very interested in streaming and then also finding out what the options would be to offer it in different languages or have translation services along with it.
Oh, thank you, Chair Ford. I do like the idea of people have so many different schedules, and we've seen so many more people involved this year. And it's been part of educating everyone. And people can go back and listen to them when it works for them. So I think that's great. And I think, you know, it's time we move on and accept that. I like the idea of people choosing. I'm glad that, you know, we had that discussion, because that's asking a lot too, for it to be recorded forever. But if they can choose, that's great. So yeah, I'm in favor of that in the language. If they can translate, that's great too. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking that, well, question, Superintendent, the cost of the cameras, how much would how long are these cameras estimated to last, or what? Just curious, any research on that?
I'm not an electronics expert, but you know, I would assume, you know, we will buy some, you know, good quality cameras that are designed for this purpose, and work with a, you know, consultant to help put the sound system into this room. So it'll be integrated into when we designed this room, we did design it to have the ability to record meetings. So it was designed for that purpose. So we're talking a few $1,000s for the cameras, and probably looking, you know, at 2 of them, and then getting them integrated in, and then obviously they come with, you'll need some iPads to help control the various views. You know, so if someone's presenting, you're going to want that camera, you know, to on, and then when the board's talking, it'll be a different camera. So it'll be an integrated system. It'll and obviously, as Director Ford said, we're not the only ones that are doing this.
Thank you, Superintendent. And the one thing that I was thinking, as far as the idea of our students being at home and being able to watch, sometimes we have schools come and present and students come and present. And the idea of students being able to watch their fellow students and cheer them on, but that can be also inspiring and, you know, just exciting for the children and family to watch. Oh yeah, there's Johnny getting, I like that idea of it when I think of the children watching, tuning in from home with their families. I think on top of the other benefits that have already been mentioned, the language, and then I like the idea of choice, giving or choosing. I'm in favor.
No, I appreciate everybody's input as far as hearing the hybrid model, and it's, you know, doing the technology to add it to the room. I think I was in favor of how it's done, and having somebody be anonymous if they need to be anonymous, if that can be addressed, if it's allowed, that'd be great. The translation services, you know, there's great, I don't want to call out a vendor, so there's great tools that would do the closed caption mentality, and they choose their language to read the language. I won't say it's my concern, but, you know, we're always budget conscious. You know, if we are adding a full FTE or a half FTE mentality to somebody to have to operate the system versus spending more money up front to make sure that it's not required to be another ongoing expense, that would be a better solution from my point of view. And I'm sure the technology is out there to do that. So thank you.
wanted to be sure it wasn't another added duty to the board secretary. She does so much anyway.
So I'm hearing overall consensus with some needs for some clarity, translation options, what's available. Also in terms of making sure it's sustainable. And I guess between the chairs and superintendent, we can follow up and just get clarity or shape it. Make sure that we're all good with that. But are we all in consensus with at least starting to build out? Okay, cool. Director McVeigh.
It would be nice if we do go down this route where one of us was missing and we normally would call in, if it would be integrated where we could actually video in. Because I know that other board members are concerned, other boards have been concerned in the past, like who else is in the room? How do we know it's you that's talking? And I don't know if that would help with the situation or not.
Okay, so we will move towards getting the live stream working, and chairs and superintendent will work towards the shaping of what it will look like and feel like. But I guess the hybrid model continues. No pun intended. All right, we are here 7:30 and meeting is adjourned. Thank you guys. Wonderful work.